Hi, we are running late tonight. This is Anne-Marie Zanzel, and
I'm Barb Rollinson.
my wife Tonda is unavailable tonight. So Barb's going to be my partner to talk with this evening because I find it's much more interesting if we talk about internalized homophobia with another person. So my definition of internalized homophobia is that I have found that within our community, in our later in life community, that most people are huge allies even before they came out.
Mhm.
Would you say you were one, Barb?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would have said, yes, I was absolutely an ally, and I was very comfortable with my queer friends. I felt like I was a part of that sphere, but I always thought it was as an ally. But in fact,
In fact,
whoopsie.
and so what I always say there, I always say is that internalized homophobia means that I don't care if anybody else is gay. I don't care if my friends are gay. I don't care if my family is gay. I don't care if, my children are gay. The only one who cannot be gay is me. And that is like in a nutshell what internalized homophobia can look like. Um, so when I put up the event, I put up also two other terms to go with it. And one of them is compulsory heterosexuality, and the other is heterosexism. So I want to get those two out of the way first because internalized homophobia sometimes gets a bad rap from the gay community. People don't like to hear that word, those words. And so sometimes other words are used. So heterosexism means that you think that being heterosexual is the only way you can live your life.
Yeah, default setting.
There's no other way to live your life except being heterosexual. And most of us know that's not true, but we've been conditioned to believe that heterosexism is, that's the only way to go. And if you go differently than that, then there is something wrong with you. The next thing is compulsory heterosexuality. That was a term coined by Adrienne Rich. She's a feminist icon. She's a lesbian. I do think she was later in life too. I think she was married first and then was partnered in her like mid 30s or so, but don't quote me on that. But I do think Adrienne Rich was also later in life. And she has some amazing poetry out there. If you like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, very sexy, very lesbian poetry. And so she talked about compulsory heterosexuality. And Barbie, you know what that means, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's when you know everything in your sphere, in your world, that directs you to be heterosexual, and there's is no other option. It's the messages that you get from your friends, your family, your school, media, your church, that just basically says there is no other option for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And not only for you, but for the entire world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. If you want to be one of us,
Yeah. So you have to be heterosexual. There's no other option.
right.
It's hence the name compulsory. Many of you have, I'm sure, seen the Compet document. It is a Google Doc that is on the internet. I would really encourage you, if you have not read it yet, to read it. You can just Google compulsory heterosexuality and find the doc. And I also have it on my resource page on my website. So, all right, Barb, tell me about your internalized homophobia. Did you have any? Like, how did it show up for you?
Oh, for sure I did. Like you explained earlier, it was a matter of, it was okay for everyone else to be gay around me.
Mhm.
And so I'm approaching 50. At a time, grew up at a time when gay was still very, very taboo. And I would say, and maybe you would agree with me with this, Emery, is that lesbian was even like a lower tier of gay. Like
Yes.
lesbian was a dirty word and like used as an insult.
Well, yeah, and you wouldn't like if you were called a lesbian in high school, that was you did not want to be called a lesbian. You know, I have about 10 years on Barb, but you would not want to be called a lesbian because that was almost like it's like a slur. Like there are other gay words out there that are slurs. And when I was in high school, and I don't know about anybody else, please comment, was lesbian a word that was a slur? Because you wouldn't want to be a lesbian.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, lesbian or dyke, that was another word that
mhm,
was, really commonly used as an insult.
mhm.
So, I never even really considered it, although I did have those latent feelings, but, I was part of the theater kids. I was in the theater group, so we were a little farther to the left and a little more accepting, but even among them, even amongst that group, lesbians weren't really fully embraced. Lots of gay guys,
Mhm.
lots
Mhm.
of gay men, and that was great in the theater, but
Mhm.
not a lot of lesbians. So there also wasn't a lot of representation
Mhm.
for us when we were younger. Like,
Mhm.
can you think of, like, in popular media, even like one lesbian we could have looked to as young people who would
Well,
have been an
the joke is if there was a lesbian in a movie, if there was a lesbian love story in a movie, the trope is that the butch always got killed at the end of the movie.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
actually, I don't know if any of you guys are fans of Killing Eve, but that just actually, if you are fans and you haven't seen it, you need to watch it because there's a lot of controversy about the final ending of Killing Eve. So it's still a trope sometimes.
Mhm,
Still a-
mhm. Well,
So,
it definitely it's something that, when you grow up in our generation, it was not a particularly accepted thing, and I can remember, even from people who I loved very, very much and who loved me, um, getting those messages. Like, I can remember wanting to wear a suit to my sister's wedding,
mhm.
and she told me, "No, you can't wear a suit." I was her maid of honor. "You can't wear a suit. People will think you're an effing dyke."
Mhm. Mhm.
And that one comment alone probably pushed me farther back into the closet than anything, probably for 10 years.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, for me, you know, my internalized homophobia, like I really, I'm trying to think about when I was young. Um, I never had any outward homophobia. I was very, very curious about gay culture and gay people. Really paid attention a lot to like the AIDS crisis when I was in my 20s and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Like I was very like interested and also horrified what was happening to the gay
Mhm.
community and like just couldn't understand how people couldn't take care of people. But mine was more of truly internalized.
Mhm.
I could not be gay.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting for me because I think I heard of the word internalized homophobia earlier, but I just couldn't wrap my head around that I could possibly be gay too. I mean, I always had those feelings. I always was very interested in women. I like spent, you know, I was a straight girl, perceived straight girl that spent a lot of nights lying awake, wondering if I was gay. Um,
Yeah, straight girls don't do that.
yeah, that straight girls don't lie awake at night wondering if they're gay, but I spent a ton of time, and I'm sure other people here have spent a lot of time doing that as well. But for me, I think that like when I came out, one of the biggest things was I met somebody that had been out for a long time. My wife had my now wife. I started dating her a couple of months after I left my husband, and she was out forever. Like,
Mhm.
she's been out 30, she jokes about it all the time, but she's been out 35, 40 years. And she challenged my internalized homophobia like all the time in our relationship. So that was really a nice thing about being with somebody who's been out for a long time, who is also comfortable in their skin.
Well, and conversely, I have dated somebody in the past who was out for a long time, and I will say selectively out, but wouldn't, for example, come out at work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, understanding that it's not always safe for everybody to come out
Hmm.
everywhere to everyone,
Hmm.
especially if you're a younger person.
Hmm.
But this is somebody who wanted to embark on a really serious relationship with me, and I'm like, but you won't bring me to the Christmas party
Yeah.
at the office?
Well, and you bring up a really good point, Barb. So this is one thing that I didn't realize, is that I thought that everybody that was out like had it all figured out, and that was like a really huge learning for me, because I thought that they had worked through their stuff. They weren't, they were
Mhm.
totally comfortable with who they are, and that was my big surprise.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There's lots of lesbians out there. I feel like I've dated them who have some lingering stuff about homophobia and even internalized misogyny, which I guess is another branch of this.
Hmm.
But folks who will decide, lesbians who will decide what is and isn't appropriate as far
Hmm.
as behavior and how to act. And I dated another woman who, for example, um, who wouldn't date any women who had slept with a man within 3 years.
3 years, because then it's all gone.
Apparently, it doesn't matter. That's the waiting period.
After about 1,000 days, everything's good and it's all erased.
That's it. Arbitrarily. I should have probably. Oh no. Anyway, I'm not here to slag my exes, but I will say, these things they filter into the very fabric of who we are,
Right, right.
and it takes a long time. If you use that analogy of stained fabric, it can take quite a few washes to get the stain out.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Mhm.
Um, One thing that really helped me, like I started to say, was like with Tonda, is that she challenged my internalized homophobia all the time. And I've talked about it a lot, but one of my most favorite stories about that is that um, I used to work as a hospice chaplain. And I remember I was with this woman, and I knew she was very conservative religious, and I was just starting to come out. And I was thinking to myself, oh my God, what if she knew I was gay, And then all of a sudden I had this thought, like, oh my God, I'm going to be a lesbian minister for the rest of my life. And it was just this thought, like, and that's internalized homophobia,
Mhm.
and it just like went through me, and I was really, really like sort of discombobulated by it. And
Mhm.
then Tonda happened to be visiting me at that point, and so we were in a long distance relationship for 18 months. So I know all about that too. And she was
That's another life. Yeah, for sure.
alive. And I came home and I told her that, and you know what she did, which was amazing. She said to me, Anne Marie, you get to be a lesbian minister for the rest of your life. How cool is that?
Yes.
And she said it with such amazing joy and excitement that I realized that, like, oh, yeah, you're right. It is cool. So it
Totally.
differentiates to me. I mean, it was like really, really cool. And I had never ever thought about it that way before.
It's changing your mindset about it. And that goes to, if we look at the worksheet. So by the way, if you're here and you haven't gotten the worksheet yet, just ping me in a DM and I will send it to you post event. One of the items on the worksheet is how imagine your life if you didn't have to hide your sexuality anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
Imagine that. So imagine, just changing your mindset about it. Oh no, I'm going to be a lesbian minister. Oh yay, I'm going to be a lesbian minister. So what is it going to be like if we don't have to have those
Well,
feelings about that
and
anymore?
you know what's really interesting? You and I have been out about the same amount of time. And what has changed for me is that, like, I'm like, my straight life is really fading, like being, married to a man, not my relationship with my children or anything like that,
Yeah.
but like living a very straight life has just sort of faded away. Like, before, like when I first came out, like, like touching Tonda in public, like putting my arm around her or something like that was, I mean, I would do it, but I was super uncomfortable with it. And then, I've noticed that I'm not anymore. Like, I'll put my arms around her, I'll give her a kiss in public, and it doesn't, I don't even think, quote unquote, that I used to think that was uncomfortable or embarrassing. And now I'm like, I don't care anymore. So it starts to fade. Did that happen with you?
Yeah, I mean, well, in a way, because when I first came out, I didn't come tiptoeing out of the closet. I came like a Formula One race car driver out of the closet.
Mhm.
Vroom! Here we go. We're doing this. And so I was all about, the hand holding and the kissing and the touching in public. But after my first partner, my first lesbian partner, and dating subsequent women, I would run into those who didn't want to do that. And
Mhm.
so it was like, oh, wait a second, you've just pulled your hand away from me. Or I can remember one time we were going out for breakfast and walking from the car to the parking lot. And I went to hold my then girlfriend's hand and she pulled it away from me. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, okay. And she's like, I'm sorry. I just don't know if I can protect you here. And what that made me realize is like being a newbie, that I also I haven't experienced really overt homophobic words and actions leveled against me.
Mhm.
And that's it's a very real trauma for
Well,
lesbians who've been out for a long time, for some.
and it's a real concern because sometimes safety is, um, sometimes you do have to think about your safety and stuff like that. I remember I flew into Huntsville, Alabama one time, and Tonda picked me up there, and I went to greet her, and she says, "Don't kiss me here." She goes, "We're not safe here." And I was like, "Okay."
Right.
And so I didn't kiss her hello or anything like that because we have to be thoughtful. Sometimes you have to be thoughtful around
Mhm.
your surroundings and where
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so on the worksheet, I'm curious, Barb, what is your earliest recollection of hearing either directly or indirectly that someone says that being gay is quote unquote bad? Because what we're trying to say here is that sometimes internalized homophobia is like seeds are planted.
Mhm.
Not like, okay, there are people that grow up in homes where there is, clear homophobia. Like
Sure.
your mom or your dad, says things about it, like a gay person. Well, they wouldn't come on TV back then, but they would see a gay person or something like that, and they say a slur, or they say something.
Mhm.
But a
Mhm.
lot of this, the seeds were planted
Yeah.
like scattered. You might hear something
Mhm.
at synagogue or in church. You might hear something from a friend. So I'm curious about you. What was yours? Like, do you remember?
I can remember distinctly being in elementary school and in the 80s when the AIDS crisis was just beginning. And I this may be triggering for some, so apologies, but I can remember the taunt on the schoolyard or the chant on the schoolyard. So do you remember that there was a commercial for Raid that kills
Hmm.
insects? The taunt was AIDS kills fags dead.
Hmm.
And it was like a funny joke
Hmm.
amongst the kids.
Hmm.
Um, that was probably the first time that I realized it's like, oh, it's really bad to be gay.
Hmm.
It's really bad. Not only are you going to get sick, but you're going to be ostracized as well.
Hmm.
And of course, being around the AIDS epidemic, it was really That was terrifying for a
Mhm,
young person who is developing their sense of self.
mhm,
I can remember being really, really scared.
mhm.
You know, it's funny with COVID, us Gen Xers are kind of like, yeah, we've been there. We've been here before.
There really was that.
We've lived through an epidemic or two. We're all right.
But
But
that
yeah.
but for people of our generation, anybody that can remember the AIDS epidemic will remember that like, so here you are, maybe you're 6 years old or 5 years old or you're 10 years old or something like that, and
Mhm.
on the news, you hear real derogatory talks
Yeah.
about people that are gay. You
Mhm.
hear bad words, words that shouldn't be said, all
Mhm.
those things like that, and you realize, and that message is, oh, it's not safe. It's not okay to be gay,
Mhm.
because if I'm gay, then they'll be talking about me on the nightly news.
Well, if you remember so another example, when Katie Lang came out. Now,
Mhm,
I was a young person as well, and my dad loved country music. He loved Katie Lang.
mhm,
And I can remember when she finally came out, he was so sad. And it's
mhm,
not because he was anti-gay, but I said, "Why?" He's like, "Her career's over."
but it wasn't.
But it wasn't. Pretty fabulous, still one of my faves. But again, that message of you can't be healthy, you can't be loved, you can't be successful, you can't have a career if
Right.
you are a gay person. And those messages came from all over, and weren't necessarily overtly like angry or as an insult. It was just more of a generally accepted truth.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm. And ironically, Tonda has a connection to Katie Lang because she came and tried to make it here in Nashville back in the 1980s as a country music singer. And because of who she was and how she looked and everything like that, there was like, she couldn't, it wasn't going to work for her
yeah.
being, and that was people's own homophobia
Mhm.
towards, a woman who was butch, you know? So, have you ever, so the next question we talk about, were you ever fearful about disclosing your attraction to other women, and how does or did that fear change your behavior?
I don't know for me if I was afraid. I just didn't think it was real somehow.
Mhm.
It was practice or it was pretend.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and it was certainly something that you didn't disclose
Mhm. Mhm.
because it wasn't real.
Mhm. A- And I know a lot of times, well, and now I'm thinking about it, Barb, it's also too, it's because we don't listen to our own inner voices, right?
Mhm.
Because we don't believe ourselves. Like, oh, I am attracted to this person. Oh, she is a girl. And it's more than a friend. A lot of us think that, like, a lot of times when people come out later in life, they start, looking back on their lives, and they often have a lot of recovered memory. And
Mhm.
not in the sense of something they have forgotten, but in the sense that something they put in one category, they realize it actually belongs into another category. A
Right.
lot of women who come out later in life often have very intense relationships with women when they're
Mhm.
younger and stuff. And so what they didn't realize is that it was so much more. They didn't want to be that person or admire that person. They actually had a crush on that girl. you
Right.
and stuff like
Or
that.
if I kissed that girl, it wasn't real kissing. It
We
was
were
just
just
practice
pretending. We're
kissing.
practicing. We were practicing stuff.
Sure love practicing.
So so it sounds like that you really didn't have to deal with it a lot coming out, like, for
Um,
yourself.
Initially coming out, like, the internalized part, that didn't come until much, much later.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, I was out for a while before I started to recognize where internalized homophobia had inserted itself into my life. And it wasn't until much later that I had to confront that.
Mhm.
Initially when I came out, I was just like, "Wee!
Yeah, me
Good
too.
times, this parties, this is great,
Right.
this is wonderful, this is magical, this is special, this is fun, I love this. And then it wasn't until sort of the excitement of that settled down that I started to really reflect.
I really relate to that because I was super excited. Like I told a ton of people that I came out way too many, too many people, and I
Yeah.
was so excited about it and so happy to like finally tell my truth to other people because once you start going, you just start telling everybody and stuff. Like at least that was for me.
Mhm.
But then later on, like that incident with the woman that I saw, the deeply conservative woman, and oh my God, I'm going to be a lesbian minister the rest of my life. Like that's when my internalized homophobia started coming up, and so one of them, like, so for me to like, how did I get rid of it? By living as an openly out queer person.
Yeah.
That is how I I don't think I have any anymore. I really don't. I mean, I might, but like living out as an openly gay woman, being married to a woman, it has really just changed my perspective on it. And so I think sometimes the cure for internalized homophobia is living very out, but being very comfortable with being out. And
Mhm.
because we do know people that live out, but they still,
Yeah,
really struggle loving themselves for
yeah,
who they are. So
absolutely.
I think the second thing too is, so yes, living out, but I also think the next thing is really talking about really learning to love that aspect about yourself. It's
Mhm.
like self-love, self-compassion, um, because we're not going to get it right every time and everything like that. But I do think self-love and self-compassion goes a long way in healing um, uh, people's internalized homophobia. And I know we're running over, but we started a little bit late. I also hear oftentimes too, a lot of people talk about, um, like their parent, like especially religious people who grew up in religious homes, like gay people that grew up in a really conservative churches. They often struggle mightily with internalized homophobia. And it's because, they were preached to from the time that they were very, very young that being gay was wrong.
Mhm.
So, and I've seen people say things, well, it's my parents' belief system and stuff like that, but that is just prejudiced. And we deserve to be treated, all of us, as um, beautiful, beautifully created creatures, and that this is the way we were created to be. And the choice, I say this all the time, the choice isn't whether you're LGBTQ or not. The choice is what you're going to do with it. And
Mhm.
how are we going to live our lives as authentically as possible?
Yeah, yeah. I see Dot is asking, do we ever get rid of internal homophobia totally, and does it still cling somewhere? What do you think about that? Does it ever just do you think it disappears or
Um, I do. Like we were talking about a little bit before, I think it does. I think it does by living out and as authentically as we can, in the parameters that we have. And I also think it involves doing a lot of self work and letting go of your prejudices against the queer community, and learning to listen to your own voice and what you want and who you are as a person. So
Mhm.
I do think you get rid of it. I think it takes a while. I don't think it happens like magically. Like we come out, like you said, you came out with busting out of the doors,
I did.
and you didn't have any at first. You didn't think you had any.
I didn't think I did, but it was in there. It was in there for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, and then Dot asks, is there such a thing as heterophobia among lesbians who've been out for a long time?
So don't accept us. Those who come out late say we're only curious or visiting not really lesbians, especially been married to men. So gatekeeping lesbianism. Yes. Yes. Yes, Dot. That is really a thing.
That is, so there are gatekeepers, like Barb,
Like
the
the 3 years.
the 3-year rule.
Yep.
And then you're a virgin again.
Like magic. Wow. Nobody's accused me of being a virgin in a long time, so.
No, the thing is, though, is that yes, there are people that are gatekeepers to their community, and that's more about them than it is about you. And so, if we meet one as a gatekeeper, just remember it's about them and it's not about you. There are tons of lesbians and other members in the LGBT or women loving women. Some women use that term, that are very comfortable with, no matter how people get there, and don't have a lot of judgment around that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you meant one yesterday. It does really hurt. And it really hurts if you're just coming out, like if you're brand new and you happen to meet somebody like that. I just really encourage you, if that happens, is just to remember, okay, this is about her. This isn't about me. And oftentimes, the reason why, Dot, is because a lot of times there are some lesbians that are just attracted to, they seem to want to be with straight women. And so they enter into a relationship with a straight woman. And sometimes those women go back to men, sometimes they don't. And there is women that start coming out of the closet and they end up, we all know this. That's why we're here in this support group, is it's hard. And so when it gets too hard for them, they may go back to their previous relationship with their husband or go back to relationships with men. And if you happen to have fallen in love with this woman, it can be incredibly painful. And so that is why sometimes people are gatekeepers, because of their own pain that was, that someone caused them.
Oh, for sure.
Any last thoughts, Barb?
Just that, to expand on what you were just saying, when we come out and we encounter like what Dot just experienced, and finding somebody who's a gatekeeper and feeling shut out, it is so painful, because as newly out older lesbians, we really need community. And so feeling shut out of community by somebody who's been there for a long time really can hurt. So I'll just end by saying, you will find your community. You have found your community. You're here. Right? There are so many different flavors of lesbian out there. and there are so many who are warm and accepting and ready to embrace you for who you are. And this is a great spot for that. And beyond here as well. So I'm sorry that hurt, but your people are out there.
And also too, I do want to say something. There are also two long time out lesbians who may meet you and say, "Oh, I'll be your friend," but I don't want to date anybody just coming out. And it may sound like, oh God, what a terrible thing to say, but they also are actually just setting boundaries. They know their limits. They also have come out themselves. So they know what it's like to date somebody that's newly out, all the ups and downs and the back and the forth. Am I gay? Am I not gay? Am I gay? Am I not? All those things we go through. And so a lot of times it's, and I've heard of a lot of people who have like met somebody who's like been out for a while, and they'll say, I can't date you, but I'll be your friend. And they actually end up becoming really good friends with people who've been out for a while. So what I'm going to say to you, if that happens to you, say yes. Okay. Because that woman can be a key for you to have in-person community outside of Facebook, outside of, whatever online community you're a part of, because she's most likely local. And so if she says, I'll be your friend, say, yeah, that'd be great, and maybe be hurt inside, but, because the thing is then you can start building your in-person community, because that's what you need. That's really, really important, more than anything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
Most important thing, community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Barb Rollinson. Barb Rollinson found out at 6:20 Central Time that she was going to do this with me, because my wife had to go do something else, and I like to have someone to talk to. So thank you. You were amazing. You pitch hit, and you were so good at it, and I'm so glad you were here. So thank you. All right, y'all. Have a good night. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.